Thank you, band. All right, church, we're going to continue our series, Faith and Reason. We'll start with our main text, 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 15 and 16. If you have your Bible, you can open it up there. If you don't, it'll be on the screen. It says, "But in your hearts regard Christ the Lord as holy. Be ready at any time to give a defense," or an apologia, that's where we get the word apologetics, "to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. Yet do this with gentleness and respect, keeping a clear conscience, so that when you are accused, those who disparage your good conduct in Christ will be put to shame." And again, this is a challenge to us believers who are adamant about sharing our faith. Remember, apologetics is only useful if you're going to share your faith. And it gives us the framework that we need to engage a culture that is ever more skeptical than it has been before. And so we have to find different starting points. Now, we've talked about the cosmological argument for God's existence a couple weeks ago. And remember, the purpose of this series is not an exhaustive apologetic. It is to whet your appetite enough, hopefully, for you to research some of this stuff yourself. That's where a lot of your learning is going to come from. Diving into this, at the bottom of your notes each week, I put some suggested resources to check out, different authors to read, websites to check out. But at the end of the day, you've got to tackle these questions for yourself. So we talked about the cosmological argument, the teleological argument last week, the argument for design. And I won't rehash all of those, but you can go to our website, bridgewayamelia.church, and those sermons are on there. Today we're going to talk about meaning. Remember, the four main categories in which we will be discussing is origin, so where did I come from? Meaning, is there a purpose to life? Morality, how should I be living? And destiny, where am I going? And these are kind of like the puzzle pieces that I think everyone is trying to figure out. The problem, I think, is that most people are trying to figure out life itself with these different pieces, but there's no unifying picture, or they don't believe there's a unifying picture. And what we're trying to do is to show them what that unifying picture is. Now, if you're trying to put this puzzle together, I borrowed it from my awesome mother-in-law who likes her puzzles. This is 2,000 pieces. It's a big puzzle. And to try to put it together with no idea of what the massive picture is, you're simply putting things together the best that you can, or how you think things will work. And if there is really no objective meaning to life, I think this is how most people go through life. They have these different pieces, some that make sense, some that don't make sense, but they're just piecing it together the best that they can. And what we're asking is there a unifying picture, something that we can see that makes sense out of this puzzle we call life? And we believe that God is this unifying picture. Now, apologetics, if you remember, some of the arguments we're talking about, they're giving you the reason to, as I use an example of a chair, they're giving different reasons why you should sit in the chair, but faith is ultimately sitting down in the chair. We believe that the unifying picture, how we make sense out of this life, how we know there's meaning and there's purpose, ultimate meaning, ultimate purpose, is God, that we are created, that we are not an accident. But if there is no God, there is no such thing as a unifying picture. There is ultimately no purpose, no meaning to your life. You're technically not even supposed to be here. You're an accident. You're the result of random mutations over long periods of time, and then boom, here you are. You weren't supposed to be here to begin with, and so there is no unifying picture to your life. If there is no God, there is no meaning whatsoever. To quote Bertrand Russell, the late atheist philosopher, he said that man is the product of causes which had no provision of the end they were achieving, that no fire, no heroism, no intensity of thought and feeling can preserve an individual life beyond the grave, that all labors of the ages, all devotion, all the inspiration, all the noonday brightness of human genius are destined to extinction in the vast death of the solar system. And that the whole temple of man's achievement must inevitably be buried beneath the debris of a universe in ruins. All these things, if not quite beyond dispute, are yet so nearly certain that no philosophy which rejects them can hope to stand. Only within the scaffolding of these truths, only the firm foundation of unyielding despair, can the soul's habitation henceforth be safely built. Don't you feel uplifted right now? I'm encouraged, Brent. Let's pray and get out of here. But my question, I'm trying to ask this question, is the only foundation in which we have this foundation of unyielding despair? Is that the only foundation, the only conclusion? Now, in Bertrand's mind, of course it is, because to him there is no God, and so on the foundation of unyielding despair, that's how you build your life. Now, the implications of this are huge. Because if there is no purpose to your life, it doesn't matter what you do, whether good or bad. It all comes out in the wash. As he said, our solar system will eventually die off, and nothing will ultimately matter. Nothing. Whether you were Mother Teresa or Hitler, ultimately nothing will matter. Now you say, well, Brent, you don't have to believe in God to give purpose to your life. You can give purpose. Sure, you can ascribe purpose to your life. But doesn't mean there's an objective, ultimate purpose for your life. Furthermore, I have the question of, why do we have a longing for purpose to begin with? Why is that in there? That we feel as if there is no God, why do I feel like I have to have something in which to live for if I'm just this biological machine that's not even supposed to be here? Why do I have this yearning to give value and meaning to my life? As C.S. Lewis said, if the universe has no meaning, we should have never found out that it has no meaning. Just as if there were no light in the universe, and therefore no creatures with eyes, we should never know it was dark. Darkness would be without meaning. So essentially he is saying the reason we have this longing is because there is an ultimate meaning to this life. That's why this is in us. That's why people ascribe purpose to their life. Is there an ultimate purpose? Now, we do live in a society that is, as I said, more skeptical than ever. My generation, the millennials, and Generation Z, the level of our faith is smaller than any previous generation in American history. In fact, one poll I read was something about, it started with the baby boomers. Where are my boomers at? Got any baby boomers in here? Yeah, everything's your fault. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Gen Xers, no one cares about you. They just talk about us millennials and the Gen Z. But it had the importance of faith in each generation and who considered faith incredibly important. And when you get down to my generation and the generation after me, Gen Z, only 30% consider faith to be something of incredible importance. The fastest religious group, so to speak, in my generation would be what we call the nuns, not the N-U-N, the N-O-N-E-S, the nuns. There's no faith whatsoever. But I think the implications of such things are profound. I think there's a direct connection to the rise in anxiety and depression in my generation, which is growing quicker than any other generation currently. An article from CBS News says depression, anxiety, suicide increase in teens and young adults, study finds. To quote the author of the study, Jean Twenge, she said, we found significant increases in major depression, serious psychological distress, which includes anxiety and hopelessness and suicidal thoughts and suicide attempts among teens and young adults. It becomes more inconsistent increases with adults 26 and older. Now, the article goes on to blame it essentially on social media, and that very well may be part of the issue, but I think it's hard to dismiss when you have a generation that has essentially come to conclusions that there is no God and no point to ultimate purpose to this life. They ascribe purpose where they want to ascribe purpose. You're going to come to the same conclusion, I believe, that we're going to see in Scripture with Solomon, that you can have everything that you want. It is not ultimately going to fulfill you. And so, of course, the more this is believed, I believe the more anxiety one will have. You don't know what the meaning of your life is. You don't know the ultimate destiny for your life. It's just, I'm here, but nothing I do is ultimately going to matter. And that should bother us as a church, that this idea that there is no God, there is no point to our life is so popular and growing because of the implications. We're going to continue to see this grow and flourish in younger generations. Now, what I don't want us to do is to step back and say, yeah, they're really screwed up. I mean, that generation just not as good as my generation. We can get into all those things of this generation did that, this generation did this. Every generation has its faults, right? Let's be honest about that. I mean, the Jim Crow laws were in effect when Christianity was more popular in our country. That's not good. Right? That's not good. If we want to start pointing fingers about generation did this, generation did that, every generation has its faults. And I don't want us to look at these other generations and say, yeah, they just stay on their phone all the time and they don't care about this, they just care about themselves. That may very well be true, but there is still hope for them. We are to be ready to give an answer of the reason of the hope that is in us. We have that hope. We have that unifying picture, which Jesus Christ makes so evident. Again, these arguments I'm giving you, cosmological, teleological, they can get you to theism. They're an intellectual assent. But Jesus is what ties it all together. Jesus is the one who tells us who the designer is, who designed everything, the lawmaker who gave us the laws of physics. Jesus is the one who ties it all together. But we have a culture that starts with not even a belief in God or belief in the Bible or any of that. And so we have to be able to engage them where they're at. We have to have different starting points. That's why we should have these tools, as I talked about last week, in our toolbox. If your only approach is just your testimony, and that's good, that's great, you're going to be lacking in tools to reach other people who may not value your testimony. We'll give them some logical reasons behind it. So, we have this increase, this issue that we're dealing with. And what I think happens is when people believe there is no God, life just becomes this, they ascribe purpose to it. It becomes this monopoly game where you just live life and get what you can, and then when it's over, you put everything back in the box, and that's it. Is that the purpose of life? To quote Ravi Zacharias, if you don't have ultimate purpose, all these tiny little purposes are nothing else but ways to tranquilize your boredom. God's made you for a purpose. All the tiny purposes become purposeful because your life itself has a purpose. I remember listening to Larry Bergeron, the founder of A Child's Hope, as he talked about becoming this very rich, brilliant executive working for a Fortune 100 company, helped create voicemail as we know it today, had all these patents to his name, all these degrees, had a chauffeur, houses in all different parts of the country. And I remember talking to him one time, he said, Brent, I got to the mountaintop and I look around and I'm like, so this is it? I've done everything I've wanted to do in this life and this is it? Now that didn't make him want to search for God. It did rattle him a little bit. Then he said, my purpose became to fight like hell to stay on the mountaintop. I got to stay on top. I got to stay on top. I got to stay on top. And then through a series of events in his life, he comes to realize the purpose of life is much more than just that mountaintop. You getting everything that you want. It will not ultimately fulfill you. It won't, because deep down, we were created for an ultimate purpose. Deep down, we were created for that. This is echoed in King Solomon in Ecclesiastes. And what happens, you can set many goals in front of yourself and many temporary purposes that are not ultimate and pursue those. But most goals reveal their emptiness only after you've wasted your time in pursuing them. Look at Ecclesiastes 1. The words of the teacher, a son of David, king of Jerusalem, absolute futility. Another version says vanity. Another version says emptiness. Says the teacher, absolute futility. Everything is futile. What does a person gain for all his efforts that he labors under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets. Panting, it returns to the place where it rises. Gusting to the south, turning to the north, turning goes the wind. The wind returns in its cycles. All the streams flow to the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. All things are wearisome, more than anyone can say. The eye is not satisfied by seeing, or the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. Can one say about anything, look, this is new? It has already existed in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of those who came before, and of those who will come after. There will also be no remembrance by those who follow them. This is a guy, King Solomon, echoing the emptiness of life in a pursuit that does not include God. This man had anything he could have ever wanted. All the women, all the wealth, all the palaces, all the best food, all the best entertainment. He had it. In fact, in chapter 2, verse 10, he says, all that my eyes desired, I did not deny them. I did not refuse myself any pleasure, for I took pleasure in all my struggles. This was my reward for all my struggles. When I considered all that I had accomplished and what I had labored to achieve, I found everything to be futile in a pursuit of the wind. There was nothing to be gained under the sun. And I think that's the point. The lie that is being bought is YOLO. You only live once. Or there's a fear of missing out. So just experience and do and gain and be. And the conclusion, as Solomon puts it, I didn't deny myself anything. And it was all futile. I achieved everything I wanted to achieve. Got anything that I wanted. And it was all, at the end of the day, complete and total emptiness. Why is that? I mean, I remember talking to several people about this. I mentioned Jared, who was on his way to be a professor at UConn and professor of philosophy, an incredibly smart kid, smartest kid ever walked through my youth group. And he talked about how he had achieved everything he had ever wanted to achieve, and yet he found himself the most miserable person on earth. And he wrestled with that. And ultimately coming back to faith in God. Had every reason not to. But he said, no, I'm going to take a chance. I'm going to take a step of faith. He had intellectual assent, but he hadn't sat in the chair. Rick Warren said, without a purpose, life is motion without meaning, activity without direction, and events without reason. Without a purpose, life is trivial, petty, and pointless. Solomon's living in a world where God, it seemed, was absent. He is living ultimately a life without meaning. He was trying to find significance and value in everything but God. And he couldn't ultimately find it. Why? I believe that's because it doesn't exist outside of God. Ultimate value, ultimate meaning, I don't believe it exists outside of a relationship with God. Let's contrast two people here. Let's take Job. You guys remember Job, also known as Job, depending on what you want to say, and Solomon, okay? Solomon gains everything. And feels completely empty. Job loses everything. And it's difficult. Just don't read the first chapter and the last chapter of Job. Read the whole thing. It's a living hell. But who does Job ultimately trust? God. Now, many of us would find ourselves in Job's situation and think, if I only had the Solomon situation, I would be doing okay. But that wasn't true. If I could only have this money to solve this problem, only had this to solve this problem, everything would be okay. But no, our ultimate peace, our ultimate comfort is the one who created everything, including us. Job reminds us that God is in control even when we can't make sense of the suffering that we're in. He reminds us to trust God even when there's question marks. I don't get it, God. And I would have been mad too, wouldn't you? I mean, Job gets pretty ticked, but still trust God. Whereas Solomon has the abundance and the greatest circumstance, or so we would think, and finds it futile. Why is that? Why is that? He has the American dream on steroids. Why is that? I think it goes back to Genesis 1. Genesis 1:26, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. It's because we were created. We have a purpose. There's something we should be doing, right? We're not an accident. Again, these arguments that I've been mentioning, cosmological, teleological, so on and so forth, they're just talking about how God created everything. Why is that important? Because if God created everything, which includes us, it means there is a purpose behind to his creation. If God didn't do that, if it is all a giant accident, we're just here. And to me, that's just the most miserable thought. Whether you ascribe meaning, and purpose to your life however you want, but if ultimately it doesn't matter, then you have built your life on the foundation of unyielding despair. And many people are buying that, building their life on a pursuit that will ultimately be vanity. And that should trouble us, church. There's a meaning to our life. We are created. God created us for him. Colossians 1, for everything was created by him in heaven and earth, visible, invisible, thrones, dominions, rulers, authorities, all things that were created through him and for him. He is before all things, and by him all things consist. So as mankind struggles to please themselves with finite things, they're missing out on the infinite relationship that they were created for in the first place. A relationship with the one who created them. And you know what? I know who that is. And so do many of you. Because Jesus Christ has changed your life. But the challenge is, we have this increasingly, this growing number of folks who don't believe this. And I don't think it's because, well, they're crazy and they want to do whatever they want. They just hate God. And no, most atheists I know are sincere about their search. They want to know. This is a difficult thing for them. They struggle with it. They ask these hard questions. I just don't think Christians were very good at answering some of those questions. I don't know. I don't think the church was equipped to handle some of those questions. One of the benefits of my generation, and there are plenty of them, believe it or not, we've started more nonprofits than any generation in American history, so put that in your pipe and smoke it. But also, we are asking the question, why? Why do we believe this? Why? And when we get the answer of, well, you just need to have more faith, that is not the right answer. Faith is a part of this, but God didn't expect us to operate on blind faith. He didn't. There's evidence, there's reasons. We should know them. Jesus came to give us life and to give it to us in abundance, he says. An abundant life through Christ. And I want my generation, I want other generations to know that. And I want to give them plenty of good reasons to believe it. I want to help them with that intellectual assent so that they can decide to sit in that chair and trust Christ with everything. I was reading a BuzzFeed article. Not something I often do, but this one intrigued me. The article was titled, "I Asked Atheists How They Find Meaning in a Purposeless Universe." You can Google the article yourself and check it out and become depressed by their multitude of answers. Basically, the article, the many responses were, ascribe purpose to your life. This is a freeing thing. It's so free to just choose the purpose, which, again, I disagree with. You're ascribing purpose. Why do you even know that there should be a purpose in the first place? And I go down, I make every internet person's mistake is when you scroll to the comment section. You know what I mean? I'm like, I just want to see the comments. And you get some, they're just belligerent and so on and so forth. But I'm like, I wonder if I can find a sincere response in some of this. And I found this one, and it intrigued me. And it says this: my biggest struggle with being an atheist is knowing that when I die, I'll just be gone and never know I existed. This makes me really sad. And death is my biggest fear because I don't want to be gone. But I also try to live each day as if it were my last and enjoy what life I have. I wish I could believe in God so I wouldn't have to struggle with this. Christian, not everyone's going to want to listen to what you have to say. But some people need what you have to say. Most Christians don't share their faith. And it's not because they don't care about people. It's because they don't know how. It's because they don't know why they believe what they believe. And they feel less than equipped to engage in a conversation with someone and give meaningful reasons behind why they believe this. Now, we can't change that for every church, but we can change it for this one. This person's been on my heart. I'd love to just sit down and give my reasons. Well, what if they don't accept it? That's not my job. My job is not to take my faith and beat someone up with it. I'm to do this with gentleness and respect. 1 Peter 3:16. Give a defense for the reason of the hope. I have hope in me, and I want to give it to you. And I'm going to do this with gentleness and respect. Because there's a meaning to your life. There's a purpose to your life. It's greater than these small things we can put in front of us here on this spinning ball. It's more than that. It's God created you. And we are separated from God because of our sin, and Jesus is the one who remedies that. That's why you need to share your faith. Now, I want you to be thinking about something, Christian. This is my challenge to you. Most of us, I would imagine, know someone who doesn't believe what we believe. Okay? They are not your enemy. I ain't going to hang out with them. That is the person that I want you to talk to. I've said it every sermon. I'll say it again. Evangelism, for most of us, will not be one conversation with 100 people. It'll be 100 conversations with one person. I want you to think of that one person that you need to have 100 conversations with. You don't need to throw all this at them at one time. Let's have a coffee at Starbucks. I want to talk to you about the cosmological argument, teleological argument, moral argument. Let's do it right now. You know, really where you start is being a good listener. That's where you start. Some of my most productive conversations have been, so where do you think we came from? How'd this get here? And you see where the conversation goes. It flows into some really amazing places. Now, if you're really scared about where to start, just say, hey, anything I can pray about for you. I've never had anyone be like, you're an idiot. Don't pray for me. Not saying those people aren't out there. There's always a Dave Hacker here and there somewhere. I love you, man. But it opens up an avenue to spiritual conversation that isn't in their face or vindictive or, beating them up with the Bible. You start with caring for the questioner, listening to them. Church, we have the hope of the gospel within us. You need to share that. Think of that one person. I want you to think about them right now. We're going to pray. Everybody, bow your head, close your eyes.